The training grounds of Citadel Prime stretched endlessly beneath the sky, so blue it looked artificial. Soldiers from 100 star systems bustled across the polished black fields, their armor gleaming, their weapons singing with a hum of directed energy. Plasma rifles, particle cannons, and neural disruptors hung at their sides like emblems of their civilization's sophistication. Pride radiated from them like heat from a furnace. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had bested black holes and torn moons apart. This was the best the galaxy had to offer. And then there was a human. Sergeant Connor Reese stood alone near the staging platform, rested his weight on a battered rifle that looked more suited to a museum than a battlefield. The wood was scratched and dull by time. The metal barrel bore scars like an old soldier's skin. There was no energy core, no smart targeting visor, no magnetic stabilization. It was primitive in a way that made the gathered soldiers shift uncomfortably, as if an animal had wandered onto the bridge of a starship. "Is that a toy?" chortled Vrexel, a towering Sarnak whose 6 arms were draped in ion shock blades. His voice clicked like dry bones rattling together. I believe he brought a relic for a child's playroom. Several others joined in the laughter, the brittle, mocking sound of those who had never been humbled. Glavrix of the Metsari hooted so loudly that a nearby instructor cast him a warning glare. Even the more disciplined Kraylon sharpshooters allowed themselves smirks behind the dark lenses of their helms. Connor said nothing. He adjusted the sling on his shoulder and looked past him to the weapon's range being prepared in the distance, where mechanical drones flickered in and out of visibility. His expression was unreadable beneath the brim of his old Earth combat cap, the same dusty green as his fatigue jacket. A long, patient silence hung in the air, thickening until the laughter faltered into uncomfortable glances. "What's the matter, human?" sneered Glavrix, striding forward with a swagger that belied his top-heavy frame. His crystalline carapace glistened like bloodied ice. "Forget your battery packs? Maybe you need a spellcaster to wind your weapon for you." Connor finally met his eyes and smiled, not with anger, but with the easy, infuriating calm of a man who knew something they didn't. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," he said, his voice rough and low, seasoned by too many campaigns and too many forgotten places. He gave the rifle an affectionate pat, as one might a loyal hound. "This is just for close work. Thought I'd bring it for the warm-up." The aliens chuckled again, but it was softer now, wary, like soldiers recognizing something they couldn't yet define. The human was either a fool or something more dangerous, and they didn't know which was worse. A trumpet of sonic horns cut through the gathering tension, summoning all to the briefing platform. Commander Trask, a massive Zokai with skin like hammered copper, stomped forward and took his place at the dais. His voice boomed to the calm implants of every gathered soldier. "Today's exercise will be conducted under live combat conditions," he announced. "You will be evaluated on target elimination efficiency, weapon control, and tactical adaptability. Top performers will be fast-tracked for the upcoming deployment rotations." A fresh wave of excitement rippled through the crowd. Deployment meant honor, credits, and command. It was what they had all come for. "Teams have been randomized," Trask continued. "But one of you—" His eyes fell directly on Connor, and for a fraction of a second, something like amusement flickered across the commander's grim visage. "One of you will operate alone. Humanity has petitioned for special consideration." Connor tipped a lazy salute in acknowledgement. More murmuring broke out, colored now with disbelief and scorn. "One human," muttered Vrexel, folding 2 of his arms across his broad chest. "Against squads." "Let him," Glavrix growled, voice full of relish. "More sport for us." Connor strolled toward the ready line, boots crunching the synthetic gravel, while squads formed into tight, disciplined knots behind him. A slender Shan operative near the back whispered something to her companion, the translation barely reaching his earpiece. "He carries death without ceremony." He smiled to himself. Maybe one of them understood. The armory bots deployed the weaponry options, racks of shimmering death machines offered to competitors. Fusion lances, graviton displacers, quantum warpikes, all gleamed under the setting sun. Soldiers grabbed them eagerly, calibrating, syncing, test firing. Connor ignored them. He tightened the sling on his antique rifle and checked the iron sights with meticulousness born of ritual. It wasn't the weapon that mattered. It was the will behind it. As the staging field reconfigured itself into a maze of barriers, pits, and shifting hazards, a low murmur buzzed through the alien ranks. Some of the more experienced among them, veterans of real wars, not simulated competitions, were beginning to feel the first faint prickle of uncertainty. The human's confidence was not born of arrogance. It had the heavy, slow-moving weight of certainty, like a storm gathering unseen over the horizon. "Commence," ordered Trask, and the first team surged forward into the course, firing and leaping, shouting strategies over their link comms. Connor waited, watching. He had no need to rush. They had made their mistake the moment they had decided he was irrelevant, and soon they would learn just how grave that mistake was. The first squads moved like a shimmering tide across the training course, weapons flaring and shields crackling against the randomized threat arrays. Drones materialized in bursts of static, firing stun bolts and micromissiles. Automated turrets snapped into life atop jagged ridges of reinforced alloy. Alien soldiers advanced with textbook precision, executing fire and maneuver drills refined across centuries of interstellar warfare. From the observation gantry, Commander Trask and his senior officers monitored the action, faces impassive, datapads flickering in their claws and hands. Metrics scrolled rapidly: shot accuracy, threat response time, defensive formations. The aliens were good, very good, every motion rehearsed, every response calculated. Connor reached back from the line, rifle cradled easily against his chest, eyes half-lidded as if already bored. A few soldiers spared him glances between bursts of suppressive fire, expressions veiled behind helmets and visors. Some smirked, others frowned slightly, as if the human's casual posture gnawed at their sense of order. The first round ended swiftly. Most teams cleared the course with minimal losses, though a few sloppy units limped away under the indifferent gaze of the instructors. The next set assembled, moving with sharpened focus, eager to surpass the posted scores. Connor's name flashed alone on the next deployment roster. He rolled his shoulders once, loosening tight muscles, and strolled forward onto the field without ceremony. No fanfare greeted him, only a few muttered jokes and a ripple of derisive laughter from the sidelines. The course shifted under hidden grav plates, reconfiguring itself into something nastier than before, a war in the broken walls, smoke-shrouded corridors, and sniper nests. Target drones materialized, armed this time with non-lethal but viciously powerful munitions. Some of the more attentive soldiers noted the difference and fell silent. Connor moved as soon as the buzzer sounded. He did not sprint, nor hug cover like the others had. Instead, he walked, calm and deliberate, rifle loose in his hands. His first shot came without warning, a sharp crack that seemed almost vulgar amidst the hiss and thrum of high-energy weapons. A drone exploded midair, spinning into fragments. The aliens, watching, blinked in confusion. Energy shields, the primary defense for most modern soldiers, were calibrated against plasma and particle streams, not raw kinetic projectiles traveling at hypersonic speeds. The bullet punched through the drone's shielding as if it were smoke. Another shot. Another drone collapsed, its servos sparking and whirring helplessly. Connor picked his way through the battlefield with a hunter's economy of movement. Where the alien squads had relied on saturation fire and automated assistance, he used timing, positioning, and an almost preternatural understanding of threat trajectories. His shots were sparse but devastating. Every pull of the trigger yielded results. In the observation deck, Commander Trask's brow furrowed. "Primitive," muttered one of his adjutants, a slim avian creature named Solrix. "Yet effective." Trask said nothing. His gaze sharpened, watching the human thread his way deeper into the killing grounds. A cluster of high-durability drones converged, launching a coordinated assault pattern. They were designed to force opponents into errors through sheer volume of fire. Plasma bolts and kinetic darts ripped through the air, carving deep scars into the ground. Connor didn't run. He dropped into a crouch behind a fractured wall, flipped the rifle's bolt with a smooth, practiced motion, and fired 3 times in quick succession. 3 drones fell. He shifted position, ghosting through the ruin before the remaining machines could recalibrate. The watching aliens leaned forward involuntarily. The human was outnumbered, outgunned, and technologically inferior. Yet he was dismantling the exercise with surgical precision. Vrexel's fists clenched at his sides. Glavrix hissed a low, disbelieving sound through jagged teeth. Even the Shan operative, her multifaceted eyes reflecting a dozen images of the field, whispered, "He is not fighting the battle they designed." Connor reloaded methodically, ignoring the artificial thunderstorm brewing overhead, ignoring the sharp stink of burning composites. His world shrank to a tunnel of focus. Target, distance, wind, movement. One after another, the threats fell. When he reached the extraction beacon, the course's virtual endpoint, a full 30 seconds faster than any previous team, a long silence greeted him. The human paused, glancing up toward the observation platform. His face was unreadable, but there was a glint of something ancient and dangerous in his eyes, a relic of the species that clawed its way out of gravity wells and across the stars through grit and sheer bloody-mindedness. Commander Trask stood, muscles rippling beneath his ornate battleplate. He gave a slight nod, a gesture of recognition, and keyed the public channel. Sergeant Reese. Pass. Priority certification granted. Connor tapped the side of his helmet in a mock salute and slung the rifle over his shoulder. He strode back toward the staging area, leaving the stunned aliens in his wake. The murmur began almost immediately, low and fevered. Questions spilled like broken dam valves. How could an ancient projectile weapon outperform plasma? Why didn't the drone's shield stop the bullets? How could a human move through live fire without powered armor? Most troubling of all, if this was what the human could do with a so-called primitive weapon, what else was he hiding? Glavrix smashed a fist into the railing, cracking the composite material. "Tricks," he growled. "Old magic." But Vrexel was silent, brooding, because somewhere deep inside, buried beneath layers of pride and arrogance, a seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing. The false calm that settled over the training grounds was brittle, a thin crust over seething uncertainty. Soldiers returned to their squads, pretending to recheck their weapons or adjust their armor, but their eyes kept darting toward the human, toward the man who had turned a relic into a reaper's scythe. Connor Reese leaned against a stack of supply crates, rolling a battered cartridge between his fingers, his expression unreadable. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't even smiling. He was simply waiting, like a man who knew the second act was about to begin. Commander Trask remained silent on the dais, consulting something on his datapad. The instructors clustered around him, voices low, glances sharp. After a moment, the commander raised one thick, scarred hand. "Prepare for unscheduled live combat evaluation," he announced, his voice amplified across the grounds. A ripple of confusion raced through the assembled soldiers. Live combat evaluations were rare, reserved for wartime conditions or emergency response drills. They were dangerous by design, because they were meant to kill those who couldn't survive the real thing. Before anyone could protest, the skies darkened. Dozens of heavy assault drones dropped from low-orbit deployment platforms, their bulky forms bristling with heavy weaponry. Unlike the training drones, these models were battlefield-grade, programmed for seek and destroy missions without restraint. The instructors scattered to observation bunkers. Shields flared to life around the perimeter, trapping everyone inside. Connor straightened slowly, the cartridge still rolling across his knuckles. Glavrix snarled, activating a shimmering personal barrier around his crystalline form. Vrexel's four arms blurred as he unsheathed twin ion blades and activated his plasma pistols. Squad leaders barked orders, pulling their soldiers into tight defensive clusters. The first assault wave struck like a hammer blow. Heavy drones unleashed rail slugs and thermal blasts, ripping into the first line of alien soldiers. Screams filled the air as energy shields buckled and bodies tumbled. The pristine training grounds transformed into a smoking ruin within seconds. Connor moved through the chaos with eerie composure. He ducked low behind a disabled shuttle, sighted along his rifle, and sent a round clean to the optic core of an advancing drone. It spiraled into the dirt, sparking and thrashing. But even he knew it wasn't enough. These drones were armored for war zones, built to withstand orbital strikes and anti-vehicle fire. His antique rifle could fell a few, but not a swarm. Not without something more. Without haste, he slung the rifle across his back and strode toward a tarp-covered mound near the edge of the field. Bullets whined and plasma beams seared the ground around him, but he moved with the unshakable focus of a man who had walked through worse fires. Vrexel caught the motion first. His four eyes widened. "What is he doing?" he barked, ducking a blast that scorched the air behind him. No one answered. All eyes turned to the human. Connor reached the tarp, hooked a hand under the edge, and tore it free with a single, violent motion. Beneath it, gleaming in the dim emergency lighting, was a monster. The GAU 19-slasher rotary gun, originally mounted on Earth's ancient helicopters, stood braced on a reinforced ground frame. 3 brutal barrels gleamed like the fangs of a mechanical beast, linked to a thick belt of massive cartridges that fed into an armored ammunition case. Beside it, a compact fusion converter whined softly, adapted to power the gun in place of its old combustion engine. Connor stepped behind it, his movements precise and ritualistic. He threw a heavy switch, and the gun's barrels began to spin, winding up with a hungry roar. Several alien soldiers backed away instinctively. The Gatling gun spoke. A torrent of metal fury exploded from the spinning barrels, a sound unlike anything in the galaxy's modern arsenals. Not a hum, not a pulse, but a deep, bone-shaking growl that drowned out even the shrieks of the drones. The heavy slugs tore through armor plating, shredded shielding, and pulverized anything that moved. Drones collapsed in mangled heaps, their high-tech innards exposed like crushed insects. The ground shook with the constant, merciless rhythm of ancient human wrath. Alien squads gaped, frozen in a moment of primal awe. Their weapons, their tactics, their precious technology, all seemed like toys beside the raw, brutal efficiency unleashed before them. Vrexel roared, charging into fray with renewed desperation. But even he could not match the destruction Connor wrought in minutes. The human pivoted smoothly, swinging the Gatling gun across fields of mechanical enemies. The bullets punched holes through battle-hardened drones that energy weapons had merely scorched. Smoke boiled up in thick, choking plumes. Shattered machines littered the field like broken statues. When the gun finally spun down, the silence was complete, an oppressive, stunned vacuum. Only the faint ticking of cooling metal and the soft crackle of distant fires remained. Connor straightened, face grim, hand steady. He reached down, withdrew another belt of ammunition from a nearby case, and began reloading without urgency, without fear. Across the ruins, the surviving alien soldiers looked at each other, no longer with scorn or mockery, but with something new and heavier: recognition, understanding, dread. Commander Trask stepped forward, his voice crackling through the battered comms. Exercise suspended. Emergency response protocols engaged. Connor said nothing. He simply fed the new belt into the Gatling gun and glanced up, meeting the commander's gaze through the haze of smoke and dust. There was no triumph in his eyes, only the cold, immutable promise that if they had thought this was the extent of human warfare, they had not yet begun to understand. Smoke twisted into the bruised sky, curling in lazy ribbons above the shattered landscape. Drones lay in ruin, their broken frames twitching from residual charge, their polished armor torn and blackened. Craters pitted the once pristine training ground. Even the air smelled different now. Scorched metal, burned polymers, and something older, the undeniable scent of feet. The surviving alien soldiers, some wounded, some merely stunned, gathered in loose, disorganized clusters. Their weapons hung limp in their hands. Their formations were broken. Their proud stances had collapsed into uncertain glances and heavy breathing. They didn't look at each other. They couldn't. Connor Reese stood alone amid the wreckage, the Gatling gun beside him like a steel monument to an older, harsher age. The barrels steamed gently, a faint sizzle audible under the lazy gusts of hot wind. He wasn't smiling. There was no gloating, no celebration. Only that same steady, unreadable calm, the quiet of a man who had seen worse and expected worse to come. Commander Trask marched across the battlefield, his heavy boots crunching over shattered drone parts. His armor was battered, a deep gash scoring across one pauldron, but he moved with purpose, jaw tight. Around him, instructors fanned out, whispering rapidly into comlinks, faces pale. They didn't look at the human. They didn't dare. Connor watched him approach, the Gatling gun reloading mechanism still clutched loosely in one hand. He tilted his head slightly, not in defiance, but in acknowledgement, like a soldier awaiting a battlefield report. "You were supposed to demonstrate adaptability," Trask said, his voice like a distant avalanche, low and unstoppable. "Not annihilation." Connor let the accusation hang between them for a moment before answering. "Adaptability is annihilation," he replied, his tone mild but carrying a razor's edge, "when survival depends on it." Trask's mouth twisted into something between a grimace and a grudging smile. His eyes, dark and reflective, took in the wreckage again, the splintered armor, the smoking hulks, the stunned silence that had swallowed even the proudest squads. "This wasn't a battle," Trask muttered. "This was an extinction event." Connor shrugged one shoulder, almost apologetically. "The galaxy doesn't hand out points for style." The gathered soldiers stiffened. Pride and resentment flickered across their battered faces. Glavrix, his crystalline armor scorched and splintered in spiderweb cracks, clenched his massive fists until fine dust spilled from the joints. Vrexel shifted uneasily, his 6 limbs moving out of instinct, the calculation behind his many eyes frantic and unfinished. Connor knelt casually amid the ruin and picked up a broken drone by its ruined wing. The once pristine machine was nothing more than a twisted wreck now. He hefted it in one hand, showing its shattered core to the assembly. "You built these to fight the wars you understand," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the ruined field. "You designed them for battles that make sense to you. Clean, efficient, predictable." He let the wreck fall from his hand with a hollow clatter. "But humans don't fight clean wars," Connor said, standing again, his shadow long in the ruddy light. "We fight ugly ones. We fight desperate ones. We fight when everything's already broken." Glavrix took an involuntary step back. Even Vrexel said nothing, the proud set of his jaw faltering. Commander Trask's gaze never left Connor. "You revealed your ace," Trask said, voice low. "You've shown us your secret." Connor shook his head slowly. "This," he gestured at the Gatling gun, still steaming faintly. "This isn't a secret. This is a warning." He stepped forward, the assembled soldiers unconsciously making space for him. Even the wind seemed to hush as he spoke. "You think you understand humanity because you've seen our colonies, our politics, our polished envoys. But you haven't seen what happens when the surface cracks, when the treaties fail, when the last walls fall and all that's left is survival." His eyes swept the gathered ranks. Shion, Vorn, Graxel, species from dozens of systems, all now standing silent before one battered human and an ancient weapon that shouldn't have worked but did. "You think war is a game of technology," Connor said. "It's not. War is a contest of endurance. It's a test of who's willing to crawl through hell with blood in their teeth and still stand up swinging." He stopped inches from Trask now, close enough that their breath mingled in the heated air. "You wanted to know if humans could adapt?" Connor whispered, voice like steel wrapped in silk. "We don't just adapt. We infect. We endure. We consume. And when necessary." He reached up and tapped the barrel of the Gatling gun lightly, once. "We erase." For a long, stretching moment, no one moved. No one dared. Then Trask straightened fully, the weight of command settling back on his shoulders. His voice cracked like a whip across the gathering. "Let it be known," he bellowed, "that Sergeant Connor Reese of Terra has completed all combat evaluations with distinction." The word distinction hit like a hammer. It wasn't praise. It wasn't pride. It was survival, a reluctant admittance of something too dangerous to deny. "Effective immediately," Trask continued. "He is authorized for command assignment within the Vanguard Corps." Shock rippled through surviving squads. A few muttered curses, quickly stifled. A few simply nodded, grim-faced, unwilling to meet Connor's eyes. None dared challenge the decree. Connor said nothing. He merely slung his battered rifle back over his shoulder and turned his back on them all, walking slowly toward the distant barracks. The field of wreckage yawned behind him, a physical testament to the truth he had carved into their bones. The Gatling gun stood like a tombstone in the center of the ruin, cooling barrels glinting under the setting light. Above them all, the battered stars burned on, cold and indifferent, Somewhere out beyond the charted worlds, the dark tide of war was still rising, silent, inevitable, and when it came, the galaxy would remember, not the neat battles, not the polished fleets. They would remember the man with the ancient weapon and the deathless will. They would remember that humanity didn't fight to win. They fought because losing was never an option.